Emily Carter had worked at the Riverside Animal Shelter in Sacramento for more than 15 years, and although she had seen hundreds of difficult cases, the gray and white cat brought in that morning unsettled her in a way she couldn't explain. The intake notes were short: no collar, no microchip, found trembling behind a dumpster near the Tower Bridge. When Emily first opened the door to the small isolation ward, the smell of disinfectant hung heavy in the air, mixed with the faint sour odor of fear. In the farthest corner of a steel cage, the cat crouched with her cloudy blue eyes fixed on nothing. They looked like marbled glass, pale and unseeing, and Emily's heart sank. The supervisor on duty explained that the vet believed the cat's blindness was permanent, likely caused by a mix of untreated infection and physical trauma. Both retinas had detached, leaving her in complete darkness. "We've been calling her Willow," the supervisor added. "Because of those eyes, they look like little moons." Willow's fur was tangled with dirt and burrs, and her body so thin that Emily could feel every bone beneath her hand when she gently reached in. At first the cat flinched but didn't strike, a small mercy in Emily's mind. Most animals in this state lashed out, but Willow simply turned her head away as if she had already given up. Emily noticed from the medical chart that the bandages from a prior attempt to treat her eyes had been chewed through multiple times. This cat had once fought hard against pain and confinement, but now she seemed too exhausted to care. She refused food, ignored water, and pressed herself against the cold metal wall, her face turned away from the world. Emily whispered, "You're safe now," but even as she said it, she felt the weight of uncertainty settle in her chest. Willow looked less like an animal waiting for a home and more like one who had already closed the door on life. A week after Willow's arrival, Emily was finishing evening rounds when she heard a commotion near the main kennel. The air was filled with sharp barks, claws skittering on concrete, and the hurried voice of Mike, one of the animal control officers. Emily stepped closer and saw a large golden retriever straining at the end of a leash, tail wagging so hard that his whole body swayed. His coat, though slightly dull from stress, still carried that honey-colored shine, and despite bumping into the chain-link panels on either side, he looked more eager than distressed. "His name's Buddy," Mike explained, trying to steady him. "Owner passed away last week. Neighbor found him alone in the house. He's 8 years old, good health mostly," but Mike hesitated, then tapped the notes on his clipboard. "Progressive retinal atrophy, pretty advanced. He can still sense light and shadow, but not much else." Emily watched Buddy stumble slightly as he turned, nose searching the air, then quickly regained balance, tail still sweeping like a metronome of joy. Unlike Willow, who had collapsed into herself, Buddy radiated stubborn cheerfulness as though refusing to let his fading vision dim his spirit. When a kennel worker passed by, Buddy tried to nuzzle her hand, missing by a few inches but correcting immediately, earning a laugh. Emily couldn't help but smile. It struck her how two animals could share the same disability but carry it in such different ways, one retreating from the world, the other insisting on meeting it head-on. As Buddy finally settled into his kennel, still humming with restless energy, Emily felt the spark of an idea, one that seemed half-wild but strangely right. Perhaps the key to reaching the cat who had already given up was the dog who refused to. The next morning, Emily arrived earlier than usual, her mind circling around the thought that had kept her awake most of the night. She knew her colleagues might call it reckless, but something told her it was worth trying. After making sure the main playroom was empty, she carefully lifted Willow's small bed, with the cat curled tightly inside, and carried it to the center of the space. The room smelled faintly of disinfectant and fresh sawdust, sunlight spilling through the high windows in soft golden stripes. Willow barely stirred, pressing her face into the worn blanket as if pretending none of this was happening. Emily then went to Buddy's kennel. The retriever greeted her with enthusiastic thumps of his tail against the bars, nearly knocking over his water bowl. Guiding him by the leash, she led him into the playroom. His paws clicked on the polished floor as he sniffed curiously, ears flicking toward every sound. For a moment, nothing happened. Buddy stood alert, nose twitching, while Willow stayed hidden in her little cocoon of blankets. Emily held her breath. Then Buddy moved a step too quickly, bumping into a metal water dish left near the wall. The clatter echoed sharply, and Willow jerked upright, ears flat, her body trembling as she pressed against the bed's edge, ready to retreat. Emily tensed, but Buddy surprised her. Instead of rushing forward or barking, he froze, lowered his body to the floor, and let out the softest whine. It was not a sound of fear, but of reassurance. The room grew still. Willow's ears twitched toward the sound, and after a long pause she lifted her head just slightly, nose testing the air. Buddy remained perfectly still, only his tail giving a gentle wag that thumped against the floor like a heartbeat. Inch by inch, Willow's body eased, no longer pressed so tightly into herself. She didn't climb out or approach, but for the first time since she had arrived, she wasn't facing the wall, she was facing him. Watching from the doorway, Emily felt her throat tighten. She had hoped for curiosity at best, maybe tolerance. What she witnessed instead was something far deeper, the fragile beginning of trust between two souls who had no reason to give it. Over the following days, Emily began setting aside short sessions in the playroom for Buddy and Willow. At first, Willow would only sit in her bed, ears twitching toward Buddy's movements, but gradually something shifted. Buddy seemed to understand her limitations instinctively. Before moving closer, he would let out a soft woof, a low rumble more like a greeting than a bark, giving Willow a sound to follow. When they walked together in the yard, he positioned himself just close enough that his body acted like a fence, guiding her steps and keeping her from bumping into walls. Staff members who passed by often stopped to watch, some shaking their heads in disbelief, others smiling at the unlikely pair. The shelter had seen many bonds form between animals, but none quite like this. One afternoon, a volunteer tossed a toy with a small bell inside across the play area. To everyone's surprise, Willow perked up, ears twitching, then slowly padded forward, her nose tracing the faint sound. Buddy trotted beside her, not too fast, letting her keep pace. When Willow finally tapped the toy with her paw, a ripple of laughter and applause filled the room. For the first time, Emily saw the faint spark of life in Willow's movements. The same cat who had once pressed herself into a corner now tentatively played again. But the bond was tested sooner than Emily expected. A routine health check required the animals to be separated for 3 days. At first, staff assumed it wouldn't matter, but by the second day, Willow had stopped eating and curled back into her old withdrawn posture. Buddy whined through the night, his voice carrying down the kennel rows until other dogs joined in chorus. The reunion was filmed on a staff member's phone. As soon as Buddy was led back into the playroom, Willow leapt from her bed and followed his jingling collar straight into his side, pressing against him with a force none of them had ever seen from her. Buddy leaned into her, tail sweeping the floor, and the video of their embrace spread quickly online. Within days, the shelter's phones rang with calls from people wanting to meet the blind cat and her golden retriever guide. Emily watched the views climb, and the story spread across local news channels, astonished at how two fragile lives had found a way to strengthen each other, and how that strength was now touching strangers far beyond the shelter walls. The shelter had never been busier. Families arrived curious to see the blind cat and her golden retriever companion they had seen on the news, but most left unsure if they could handle two special needs animals. Emily began to worry that attention alone would not guarantee them a permanent home. Then, one quiet afternoon, a woman in her early 60s walked in with a calm smile and a notebook tucked under her arm. Her name was Grace Miller, a retired special education teacher who had recently lost her elderly golden retriever. She told Emily she had read about Buddy and Willow online and felt something stir inside her. "I spent my whole career helping children learn in ways the world didn't always expect," she said softly. "Maybe I can do the same for them." Emily arranged a private meeting in the playroom. Buddy was his usual exuberant self, tail thumping against Grace's legs, while Willow stayed cautious at first. Grace didn't rush. She knelt slowly, let Buddy rest his head on her lap, and spoke in the same steady tone she had once used with her students. Within minutes, Willow turned her head toward the sound, sniffed the air, and to Emily's surprise, crept forward just far enough to brush Grace's hand. The next few visits only confirmed the connection. Grace asked thoughtful questions about their feeding routines, medications, and comfort signals. She sketched diagrams of her home, marking where she would place textured rugs to guide their steps and how she would secure staircases. She even researched bell collars and safe garden layouts. Still, Emily noticed something. While Grace seemed committed to adopting Buddy, she hesitated each time Willow was mentioned, as though unsure she could manage both. The turning point came one morning during a trial walk. Buddy was on the leash beside Grace, ready to leave the room, when Willow suddenly bolted from her bed. With surprising determination, she followed the jingling of his collar, meowing loudly until she reached the door and pressed against his side. The message was unmistakable. She would not let him go without her. Grace froze, hand still on the doorknob, her eyes filling with tears. "Well," she whispered, "I guess that settles it." From that moment, the decision was no longer in question. The adoption paperwork was thorough, as always, and Emily oversaw every step. A week later, after a final inspection confirmed Grace's home was prepared with runners, barriers, and cozy beds, Buddy and Willow were ready to leave the shelter together. As Grace led them out, Buddy stepping proudly and Willow brushing against his shoulder, Emily felt a bittersweet tug in her chest. She had fought hard for their second chance, and though she would miss them dearly, she knew they were heading exactly where they belonged. Grace's house sat on a quiet street lined with maple trees, their branches arching overhead like a canopy. On the day Buddy and Willow arrived, the air smelled faintly of cut grass, and the late afternoon sun cast a warm glow across the front porch. Grace had prepared carefully. Textured carpet runners stretched down the main hallway, furniture had been shifted to create wide, clear paths, and soft bells were tied to the back door to signal when it opened. The first evening, Buddy explored with his usual enthusiasm, tail sweeping the air, bumping into the couch once but correcting quickly. Willow, cautious as ever, crept close behind, her whiskers brushing each corner before she dared to step forward. Grace followed patiently, offering quiet words of encouragement. Within days, new routines formed. Buddy would wait by Willow's food bowl until she finished eating before touching his own, as though guarding her place. Willow learned to follow the steady jingle of Buddy's collar through the house, her paws landing just slightly behind his. At night, they curled together on the same cushion, Willow's small frame pressed against Buddy's chest, the rhythm of his breathing lulling her to sleep. There were touching moments, like the evening a thunderstorm rolled over Sacramento. The sudden crack of thunder sent Willow darting under the dining table, trembling so hard her claws scraped the floor. Buddy, though uneasy himself, padded slowly after her and lowered his body beside hers, pressing close until her shaking eased. But there were light-hearted scenes too, the kind that made Grace laugh out loud. One morning, Buddy, nose buried in curiosity, walked straight into a laundry basket, tipping it over and sending socks across the floor. Willow, startled at first, then gave a sharp meow that sounded suspiciously like scolding. Grace chuckled, shaking her head. "Looks like you've got a boss now, Buddy." Over time, the pair grew so confident together that Grace decided to share their story beyond her home. She began bringing them to local schools for special education programs, using their bond as a lesson about resilience and compassion. Children would sit cross-legged on the floor as Grace explained how Buddy used his sounds to guide Willow and how Willow in turn had given Buddy a purpose. Willow tolerated gentle strokes from small hands, and Buddy rested his head in children's laps, tail thumping slowly. Teachers later told Grace that students talked about the visit for weeks, some even drawing pictures of the cat and dog who couldn't see but somehow found their way together. Emily received updates often, photos of Buddy and Willow in the backyard garden Grace had redesigned with raised flower beds and wind chimes for orientation. In one video, Buddy waited patiently while Willow traced the path of a flower bed with her whiskers, then stepped aside as she found the way herself. In another, Willow perched on the windowsill, nose lifted to the sun, while Buddy dozed on the rug below. Each update reminded Emily that what had once seemed impossible, two unadoptable animals finding happiness, had become a story that now touched classrooms, families, and even strangers online. 3 years slipped by quietly, and when Emily finally visited Grace's home on a sunny spring afternoon, the garden was alive with color. Wind chimes tinkled softly in the breeze, guiding gentle footsteps along familiar paths. On the living room rug, Buddy now moved more slowly, his once strong legs stiff with arthritis. He lowered himself onto a heated bed that Grace had bought to ease his aching hips. Willow, no longer the fragile cat Emily had first carried into isolation, walked beside him at a measured pace, adjusting her steps so he would not feel left behind. Sometimes she made a quick chirping sound, a small note that seemed to remind Buddy where to turn. Watching them, Emily realized the roles had reversed. The dog who once guided the cat was now being quietly guided himself. Grace set down 2 mugs of tea on the coffee table and smiled. "They know each other better than I know myself," she said with a laugh. "Yesterday, Buddy nearly walked into the new side table I bought." Before he touched it, Willow chirped and steered him away. I swear she saved him from a bruise. Buddy rested his head across Willow's back as she curled against him, the two of them breathing in rhythm. Grace's eyes softened. "After my husband passed and then Sophie, my old dog, I thought joy was gone for good. But these two," she paused, wiping the corner of her eye, "they reminded me that life doesn't end with loss. It changes, and if you open your heart, it changes for the better." Emily looked at the pair on the rug, their fur contrasting gold against gray and white, and felt the same tug she had on the day they first met. They had gone from abandoned and broken to living proof of resilience and love. Their story had inspired new shelter programs across California, children's books written from Willow's perspective, and even training guides for pairing special needs animals. Yet in this quiet living room, none of that mattered as much as the simple truth in front of her. Two lives that refused to give up had saved each other. As she prepared to leave, Emily thought of all the animals still waiting in shelters, dismissed as too difficult, too broken, or unadoptable. She carried with her the lesson Buddy and Willow had written in every step they took together. There is no such thing as an unadoptable animal, only connections waiting to be discovered and hearts waiting to be opened. And if Buddy and Willow's journey touched your heart today, please give this video a thumbs up, subscribe for more inspiring rescue stories, and share it with someone who needs hope. Every shelter has its own Buddy and Willow waiting to be found, and together we can help them find the love they deserve.